Three billionaire alphas asked me, their virgin omega friend, for a child, but when I gave myself fully to them, everything changed in ways none of us saw coming. Tell us where you're following from and what time it is there. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because this story gets messier before it gets beautiful. I never thought 23 would feel like standing at the edge of a cliff, but here I was. The Han River stretched out before me like liquid silver under Seoul's twilight sky, and I could smell them before I heard their footsteps. Three distinct scents that had been woven into my life since childhood: sandalwood and leather, clean linen and bergamot, dark coffee and rain-soaked earth. Kang Minho, Park Jaewon, Choi Siwoo, my best friends, my protectors. The three men who'd built empires before turning 30 while I was still figuring out how to survive my heat cycles without losing my mind. Hayuna, Minho's voice cut through my thoughts, and I didn't need to turn around to know he was watching me with that calculating gaze that made shareholders tremble. You're doing it again. Doing what? I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. Reading futures that haven't happened yet. Jaewon stepped up beside me, his shoulder brushing mine in that casual way that would have seemed platonic to anyone who couldn't smell the tension rolling off him in waves. What did you see this time? My precognition was supposed to be a gift. Right now it felt like a curse, because 3 hours ago, I'd had a vision so vivid it left me shaking. The three of them sitting across from me in Siwoo's penthouse, asking me something impossible. Something that would shatter everything we'd built together and reshape it into something I didn't have a name for yet. Nothing important, I lied, and felt Siwoo's hand settle on my lower back, warm and steady and completely devastating to my composure. Liar, he murmured, and God, I hated how well they knew me. You've been avoiding us for 2 days. Either you saw something or we did something wrong. I could have laughed at the absurdity of that statement. These three perfect alphas, who'd never once made me feel like less than their equal, despite every social hierarchy saying otherwise, thought they'd done something wrong. The truth was so much more complicated. We need to talk, Minho said, and there it was. The exact phrase from my vision, delivered in the same tone that had made my stomach drop 3 hours ago. Privately, 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Siwoo's living room, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that made Seoul look like a kingdom of lights, and trying very hard not to throw up. They sat across from me on the opposite couch, and the symmetry of it felt deliberate, choreographed, like they'd planned this. You're scaring me, I said, aiming for humor, and landing somewhere closer to honesty. This feels like an intervention. Should I be worried about my caffeine intake? Because I'm not giving up iced Americanos. I don't care what health trend. Hayun. Jaewon leaned forward, cutting through my rambling with the kind of gentle firmness he usually reserved for hostile business negotiations. Just listen, please. I shut up. Not because he asked, but because I could smell the anxiety pouring off all three of them, sharp and acrid beneath their usual scents. Alphas weren't supposed to smell like fear, especially not these alphas. Minho spoke first, because of course he did. Kang Minho, CEO of the largest tech conglomerate in South Korea, never let anyone else control the narrative. We have a proposition, he said, and I watched his hands flex once before settling into calculated stillness. It's going to sound insane, and you have every right to say no, but we need you to hear us out before you decide we've lost our minds. My precognition flickered, showing me fragments. Siwoo's hand on my cheek, Jaewon's lips against my temple, Minho's voice whispering promises I'd never let myself imagine, and I shoved it down hard. Okay, I managed. I'm listening. Siwoo took over, his voice quieter but no less intense. There's a new regulation passing through the assembly next month. It's targeting unmated alphas in high net worth positions. They're calling it a stability measure, but it's essentially forced breeding protocol. I felt my stomach turn. That's dystopian. It's reality, Jaewon said bitterly, and all three of us are on the list. We have 6 months to either mate and produce an heir, or the government assigns us omega partners chosen for genetic compatibility, not consent. The room tilted slightly. You can't be serious. We've tried everything legal. Minho's jaw was tight enough to shatter. Lawyers, political pressure, international relocation. Nothing works. The law is airtight. So you're telling me this because I stopped because my precognition was screaming now, showing me exactly where this was going, and I wasn't ready. No, no, you can't possibly be asking what I think you're asking. We want you to carry our child, Hayun. Siwoo said it so softly, so carefully, like the words might break me. Maybe they did, a little. One child shared between the three of us, Jaewon continued, and his voice cracked on the last word. It's the only loophole. If we claim you as a shared mate and you bear an heir, we satisfy the law without losing everything we've built, without being forced into bonds we don't want. I stared at them, at these three men who'd been my family since I was 17 and too smart-mouthed for my own good, who'd protected me through university, supported my decision to stay, unmated, never once made me feel like I owed them anything, and now they were asking for everything. You want me to give up my virginity, risk my life going through pregnancy, and bond with all three of you, I said slowly, because the government is run by fascists with a breeding kink. Yes, Minho said simply, and you think this is a reasonable request. No, Siwoo's voice was rough. It's insane and selfish, and we have no right to ask. But Hayuna, you're the only person we trust, the only one who… Stop. I held up a hand, and they fell silent immediately. I need time to think. Of course. Alone, I clarified, standing up on legs that felt like water. I need to be alone. I walked out of that penthouse with my heart hammering, and my precognition showing me a future that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. Because the vision hadn't shown me saying no. It had shown me saying yes. The elevator. Doors slid shut, trapping me in a steel box with my own reflection and the ghost of their scent still clinging to my clothes. I pressed my forehead against the cool metal wall and tried to remember how to breathe like a normal person instead of someone whose entire world had just tilted 45 degrees sideways. My phone buzzed, then again, and again. I didn't need precognition to know it was them. Minho, take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere. Jaewon, I'm sorry we ambushed you. This wasn't how I wanted to ask. Siwoo, come back when you're ready, or don't. We'll understand either way. Liars, I muttered to the empty elevator, because we all knew they were panicking just as much as I was. 20 years of friendship had taught me to read between their carefully composed text messages. The lobby was blessedly empty when I stumbled out into the cool October air. Seoul at night was a symphony of neon and noise, but for once the chaos felt comforting, anonymous. I could disappear into the crowd and pretend I was just another 23-year-old Omega trying to figure out his life, not someone who'd just been propositioned by 3 billionaire alphas to have their baby. Their baby, singular. Like I was some kind of shared resource they could politely request access to. Except that wasn't fair, and I knew it. They'd looked terrified. Minho's hands had been shaking. Jaewon's scent had been acrid with guilt. And Siwoo had looked at me like I was the only lifeline in a drowning world. And that was the part that scared me most, because I'd wanted to say yes immediately. My precognition flickered again, uninvited and unrelenting. This time it showed me something different. Minho's hand on my stomach, months from now, feeling our child move. Jaewon singing softly in a language I didn't recognize. Siwoo's tears on my shoulder as he whispered, "Thank you," like a prayer. I shoved the vision away so hard, I actually stumbled on the sidewalk. "Careful," someone said, catching my elbow, and I jerked back instinctively before my brain processed the familiar scent. Cedar and mint. Sharp and clean. Hyunjin. I blinked at my university friend, who was looking at me with the kind of concern usually reserved for people actively bleeding. "What are you doing in Gangnam?" "Gallery opening." He gestured vaguely behind him at a building I hadn't noticed. "More importantly, what are you doing looking like you've seen a ghost? Bad vision." Everyone who knew about my precognition asked that question eventually. Usually I laughed it off. Tonight I just said, "Something like that." Hyunjin studied me for a long moment, then steered me toward a nearby cafe with the kind of gentle insistence that meant arguing was pointless. 5 minutes later, I was sitting across from him with an iced Americano I didn't remember ordering, watching him wait patiently for me to crack. "Three alphas want me to have their baby," I blurted out, because apparently my brain-to-mouth filter had completely disintegrated. To his credit, Hyunjin only choked on his coffee a little bit. "I'm sorry," he wheezed. "Did you just say three? As in multiple? As in more than two?" "As in Minho, Jaewon, and Siwoo just asked me to be their shared mate and bear them an heir because apparently the government has decided to play eugenics programs with unmated alphas." Hyunjin set down his cup very carefully. "Hayun, that's insane." "I know. Also probably illegal. It's actually the only legal option they have left. And you're considering it." It wasn't a question. Hyunjin had known me too long to miss the panic in my voice that came from wanting something I absolutely should not want. I took a long drink of my Americano and wished it was something stronger. My precognition showed me saying yes. "Your precognition shows you possible futures, not inevitable ones," Hyunjin reminded me gently. "You've always said you can change what you see." "Usually, yeah." I traced patterns in the condensation on my cup. But this felt different, more solid, like it's already happening and I'm just catching up to it. Or like you've already made your decision and your subconscious is trying to tell you something. I wanted to argue, but my phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo from Siwoo, the three of them at 17, gangly and ridiculous, with me perched on Minho's shoulders at some festival I barely remembered. We looked happy, uncomplicated. "When did everything get so complicated?" Siwoo's message read. "They're texting you puppy photos, aren't they?" Hyunjin asked, amused despite himself. "Worse, nostalgia photos." I showed him the screen. "Emotional manipulation at its finest." "That's not manipulation, Hayun. That's just them reminding you why they're asking you, and not some stranger the government would assign them." He paused. "Do you want to say yes?" The question hung between us like a living thing. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to run screaming. Part of me wants to march back to that penthouse and demand to know why it took them this long to ask. And part of me is terrified that if I say yes, everything changes and we can't go back." "Everything's already changed," Hyunjin pointed out. "The question is whether you change with it or spend the rest of your life wondering what if." My precognition sparked again, sharper this time. I saw myself walking back into Siwoo's penthouse, saw the hope flare in three pairs of eyes, saw my own mouth forming words I couldn't quite hear yet. And beneath it all, I saw something else. The four of us tangled together in ways that went far beyond a legal arrangement or a shared child. I saw love, messy and complicated and absolutely terrifying. I saw a future I'd never let myself imagine because wanting it felt too dangerous. "I need conditions," I heard myself say. "If I'm doing this, it's not going to be some clinical arrangement where I'm just an incubator. They want me? Fine. But they're going to have to prove it." Hyunjin grinned. "There's the Hayun I know. What kind of conditions?" I pulled out my phone and started typing before I could second-guess myself. Me. "I'll meet you tomorrow, same place, and I'll give you my answer. But it's going to come with strings attached, so prepare yourselves." Three responses came back almost instantly. Minho. "Whatever you need." Jaewon. "Name your terms." Siwoo. "We're already prepared to give you everything." I stared at that last message for a long time, my heart doing complicated things in my chest. "So," Hyunjin said casually, "when's the wedding?" "Shut up," I muttered, but I was smiling, despite myself, because tomorrow I was going to walk back into that penthouse and change all of our lives forever. I just had to figure out how to do it without losing myself in the process. "Earth to Hayun." Hyunjin waved a hand in front of my face. "You're doing that thing where you stare into the middle distance like you're downloading information from the universe." "I'm strategizing," I corrected, taking another sip of my Americano. The ice had mostly melted, diluting the bitterness into something almost palatable. Almost. "There's a difference." "Right. And what's the strategy?" "Walk in there tomorrow and announce you'll bear their children, but only if they agree to name the baby after me." I snorted despite myself. "Please, if anyone's getting naming rights, it's me. I'm the one doing all the actual work here." "See, that's the spirit." Hyunjin leaned back in his chair, studying me with that artist's eye that missed. Nothing. Though I have to ask, what are you actually going to demand? Because knowing you, it's going to be something either brilliantly practical or completely unhinged. Both, probably. But I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Minho, and the message made my stomach flip. Sleep well tonight. Tomorrow changes everything. That's ominous, Hyunjin observed, reading over my shoulder without shame. Also weirdly romantic? I can't decide if he's threatening you or proposing. With Minho, it's usually both. I pocketed my phone before I could overthink my response. He's been like that since we were kids. Everything's a calculated risk, even emotions. And Jaewon? Siwoo? I considered the question, tracing the rim of my cup. Jaewon feels everything too much and pretends he doesn't. Siwoo feels everything too much and can't hide it even when he tries. And you're planning to bond with all three of them, permanently. This won't be complicated at all. I haven't said yes yet. Hyunjin gave me a look that clearly communicated what he thought of that particular denial. My precognition flickered without warning, sharp enough to make me flinch. This time the vision was different, darker. One of them pulling away, scent gone cold and unfamiliar. Rejection carved into features I'd memorized years ago. And beneath it all, a bone-deep certainty that I'd made the wrong choice. But which choice? Saying yes or saying no? The vision fractured before I could grasp it fully, leaving me with nothing but the ghost of heartbreak and the metallic taste of fear. Hayun? Hyunjin's voice came from very far away. You okay? You just went completely white. Fine, I lied automatically. Just tired. It's been a long night. He didn't believe me. I could see it in the way his eyebrows drew together, in the concerned tilt of his head. But Hyunjin had learned years ago not to push when I shut down, so he just nodded and stood up. Come on, I'll walk you to the subway. The night air hit me like a slap when we stepped outside, cold enough to clear some of the fog from my brain. Souls sprawled around us in all directions, alive and indifferent to the minor existential crisis happening in one unmated Omega's head. Can I ask you something? Hyunjin said as we walked. And I want you to actually think about the answer instead of deflecting with sarcasm. That's asking a lot, but sure. Do you love them? I almost tripped over my own feet. What? Minho, Jaewon, Siwoo? Hyunjin kept his eyes forward, hands shoved in his pockets. Do you love them? Not as friends, as potential mates? The question sat between us like a live grenade. I don't know, I said finally, and it was the most honest I'd been all night. I've never let myself think about it that way. They're alphas. I'm an omega. We've been friends since I was 17 and stupid, and they were 19 and barely less stupid. Crossing that line feels like setting fire to the only stability I've ever had. Or, Hyunjin suggested quietly, it feels like finally admitting what's been true all along. I wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons why romantic feelings for my three best friends was a terrible idea, even before adding a government-mandated baby into the mix. Wanted to point out that love and mate bonds were completely different things, and just because my biology might be compatible with theirs didn't mean my heart was. But my precognition chose that moment to show me another flash. Jaewon's hand cradling my face like I was something precious. Minho's voice, rough with emotion, saying my name like a prayer. Siwoo's scent wrapping around me, warm and safe and absolutely devastating in its tenderness. And underneath it all, my own voice, whispering, I love you. I love all of you. I hate my life, I muttered. Hyunjin laughed. No, you don't. You just hate that it's getting interesting. We'd reached the subway entrance, and he pulled me into a brief hug. Whatever you decide tomorrow, make sure it's what you want, not what they need, not what the government demands. What Omega Kang Hayun wants for his own stubborn, sarcastic, precognitive self. When did you get so wise? Art school. It's very enlightening. He stepped back, grinning. Now go home, sleep on it, and try not to have any more apocalyptic visions before morning. No promises. I watched him disappear into the crowd before heading down into the subway station. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the platform too crowded, but it all felt oddly grounding, real, normal. Tomorrow I was going to walk back into Siwoo's penthouse and upend all of our lives. Tonight I was just another person trying to get home. My phone buzzed one more time as the train pulled into the station. Siwoo again. Thank you for not running away completely. It means more than you know. I stared at the message as people pushed past me onto the train, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Finally I typed, I'm still deciding if running away is the smart choice or the coward's choice. His response came before the doors even closed. With you, I'm betting it's neither. You don't run and you're not a coward. You're just careful with your heart. We don't blame you for that. The train lurched forward, and I grabbed a pole to steady myself, reading his words over and over like they might reveal some hidden truth I'd missed the first 17 times. Careful with my heart. Was that what I'd been doing all these years? Or had I just been too scared to admit I'd already given it away to three alphas who probably didn't even realize they owned it? Tomorrow, I thought as the train carried me through Seoul's underground veins. Tomorrow I'd figure out if I was brave enough to stop being careful. Tonight, I'd let myself imagine what it might feel like to say yes. If you're hooked on where this is going, hit that subscribe button. Things are about to get a lot more complicated, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when I walk back into that penthouse with my answer. The apartment was dark when I finally made it home, which meant my roommate Dongmen was either out or already asleep. Good. I wasn't ready to explain why I looked like I'd been emotionally ransacked by a freight train. I dropped my keys on the counter and headed straight for my room, but my precognition had other plans. The vision slammed into me without warning, vivid enough to make me grab the doorframe for support. Tomorrow. Siwoo's penthouse. Me standing in front of all three of them, with a piece of paper in my trembling hands, reading conditions I'd spent all night, writing, and their faces, God, their faces when I got to the last one. The vision cut off before I could see their answer, leaving me breathless and shaking in my dark hallway. Rude, I muttered to my own brain. Really rude timing. My phone lit up on the counter where I'd left it. Not a text this time, but a call. Jaewon's name glowed on the screen like an accusation. I stared at it for 3 rings, weighing the wisdom of answering versus the cowardice of letting it go to voicemail. On the 4th ring, my hand apparently made the decision without consulting my brain. It's almost midnight, I said instead of hello. I know. His voice was rough, like he'd been awake too long or thinking too hard. Probably both. I can't sleep. That's not my problem. Isn't it, though? A pause filled with the sound of movement on his end. Pacing, maybe. You're all I can think about, Hayun. You and this impossible thing we asked you to do. I keep wondering if we just ruined everything. My chest did something complicated. You haven't ruined anything yet. I haven't given you my answer. But you're going to say no. Not a question. A conclusion he'd already drawn, probably sometime between my dramatic exit and now. I can hear it in your voice. You can't hear anything in my voice except exhaustion and caffeine withdrawal. I moved into my room, phone pressed to my ear, and collapsed onto my bed without bothering to turn on the lights. And for the record, I haven't decided anything. Liar. Excuse me? You've already decided. Jaewon's voice dropped lower, intimate in a way that made my skin feel too tight. You decided the moment we asked. You're just trying to figure out if you're brave enough to go through with it. I hated that he was right. Hated it almost as much as I hated the way my heart started racing at the certainty in his tone. And what do you think I decided, I asked, going for casual and landing somewhere closer to breathless. I think you're terrified of saying yes. A breath. But you're going to do it anyway. Your confidence is astounding. It's not confidence, Hayun. It's hope. Something creaked on his end, like he'd sat down suddenly. And hope is terrifying when you've spent 28 years convinced you don't deserve the things you want most. The confession hung between us, raw and vulnerable in a way Jaewon never allowed himself to be. Not even with me. What do you want? I heard myself ask. Really want, not what the government's forcing on you. You. Simple. Devastating. I want you to look at me the way you think I don't notice. I want to wake up knowing you're safe because you're ours. I want our child to have your eyes and your terrible sense of humor and your gift for seeing futures that haven't happened yet. It too paused. I want to stop pretending that friendship is enough when it stopped being enough years ago. My precognition sparked again, showing me a flash of Jaewon's hands on my skin, his lips against my throat, his voice murmuring words I'd never let myself imagine hearing. You can't just say things like that, I managed. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, sweetheart. But I'm done playing it safe. The endearment hit me like a physical thing. He'd never called me that before. Never let his carefully controlled alpha instincts slip enough to use terms that implied anything beyond platonic affection. Jaewon, I know. Too much, too fast. He laughed, but it sounded pained. Minho told me not to call you tonight. Said I'd just make things worse. But I needed to hear your voice. Why? Because tomorrow you're going to walk into Siwoo's penthouse and either save all of our lives or break all of our hearts. And I needed you to know that whatever you decide, I meant what I said. You're what I want. You've always been what I wanted. My bedroom ceiling came into focus in the darkness, familiar cracks and shadows I'd memorized over the past 2 years. Everything felt surreal, like I'd stepped sideways into someone else's life where alphas confessed feelings over midnight phone calls, and I had to decide the fate of 4 people's futures before breakfast. I'm going to have conditions, I said quietly. If I say yes, and that's still a very large if, you need to understand that I'm not doing this as some kind of favor or legal loophole. If I give you this, if I give you me, then I need to know it's real. It's real. No hesitation. God, Hayun, it's the realest thing I've ever felt. You don't even know what I'm going to ask for yet. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, the answer's yes. I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me like a baptism or a benediction, or maybe just permission to want something I'd convinced myself was impossible. I should let you go, I said, even though every part of me wanted to keep him on the line until sunrise. We both need sleep. Will you tell me something first? Maybe. Are you scared? The question was so gentle it made my throat tight. Terrified, I admitted. Of all of it. Of saying yes, of saying no, of what happens either way. Of waking up 6 months from now and realizing I made the wrong choice. Me too. A breath. But I'm more scared of not trying, of letting you walk away because we were too afraid to ask for what we wanted. You already asked. And you haven't answered yet. A pause weighted with everything we weren't saying. Sleep well, Hayun. Tomorrow we find out if hope is enough. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me alone in the dark with my racing heart and my impossible choice and a vision of a future that felt more inevitable with every passing second. I pulled up my notes app and started typing, fingers moving faster than my brain could keep up. Conditions for saying yes, I titled it. Then I started writing everything I needed them to understand before I could give them what they were asking for. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking and my heart was hammering, and I knew with the kind of certainty my precognition usually reserved for major life events, that tomorrow would change everything. I just had to be brave enough to let it. My phone screen glowed in the darkness, the document still open, words I'd typed in a fever of honesty staring back at me like accusations, or maybe confessions. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. Condition 1. This stops being about the law and starts being about us. My finger hovered over the delete button. This was insane. I was literally drafting terms and conditions for agreeing to have a baby with 3 alphas like it was some kind of business contract. Minho would probably appreciate the efficiency. Jaewon would panic at the implications. And Siwoo would read between every line and see exactly what I was really asking for. I kept typing. Condition 2. No more pretending you're asking me as friends. If I'm giving you everything, you don't get to hide behind platonic excuses anymore. My precognition flickered, but gentler this time. A soft vision of Siwoo reading these exact words, his breath catching, eyes going wide with something that looked dangerously close to hope. Condition 3. I'm not an incubator. I'm not a solution to your legal problems. If you want me, you want all of me, broken parts included. The broken parts. God, where did I even start with those? I'd never told them about the nightmares I still had sometimes. The ones where I saw futures so dark, my precognition felt more like a curse than a gift. Never explained why. I'd stayed unmated despite dozens of offers. Why the thought of bonding with someone who didn't truly know me made my skin crawl. Never admitted that the only people I'd ever imagined bonding with were the three alphas who'd been in my life so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to exist without them. A key turned in the front door. Footsteps, too heavy to be quiet, stumbled through the living room. Hayun, Dongmin's voice slurred with alcohol and probably bad decisions. You awake? I considered pretending to be asleep, but he was already pushing my door open, backlit by the hallway light like some kind of disaster waiting to happen. Do you know what time it is? I asked instead of answering his question. Time for you to tell me why Park Jaewon just bought out the entire champagne stock at Club Eloi and dedicated it to the most beautiful Omega in Seoul who's going to ruin my life in the best possible way. Dongmin leaned against my doorframe, grinning like he'd just uncovered state secrets. Want to explain that? My heart stopped. He did what? You heard me. He's absolutely wasted, by the way, like philosophical drunk. Started crying about destiny and second chances. It was extremely uncomfortable for everyone involved. Dongmin's grin widened. So I'll ask again. What's going on? Nothing. Liar. That man has been in love with you since we were in university, and you've been oblivious about it for just as long. What changed? Everything, I wanted to say. Everything changed in the span of one impossible question. They asked me to have their baby, I heard myself say, because apparently my brain-to-mouth filter had completely abandoned me. All three of them. Shared mate situation, government regulation. It's complicated. Dongmin's expression cycled through at least 5 different emotions before landing on something between awe and concern. Hayun, that's okay. That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard or the most insane. I genuinely can't decide. Join the club. We meet in my anxiety-ridden brain every night at midnight. He moved into the room properly, sitting on the edge of my bed with the careful movements of someone trying not to spill his drunk self all over the furniture. Are you going to say yes? I don't know. I showed him my phone, the list of conditions still glowing accusingly. I'm trying to figure out if I'm brave enough. Dongmin read in silence, his expression softening with each line. When he finally looked up, his eyes were gentler than I'd ever seen them. Hayun, these aren't conditions. This is you telling them you're in love with them and terrified they don't feel the same way. I'm not in love with them. Right. And I'm not drunk. We're both liars tonight, apparently. He handed back my phone. You know what I think? I'm sure you're about to tell me. I think you're putting up walls because you're scared of what happens if they say yes to all of this. Because then you'd have to admit you want them just as much as they want you, and that's terrifying when you've spent your whole life convincing yourself that being wanted was dangerous. I stared at him. When did you become a therapist? Alcohol makes me insightful. It's a gift and a curse. He stood up, swaying slightly. But seriously, Hayun, those 3 alphas have been circling you like planets around the sun for years. Everyone sees it except you. And now they're finally being honest about what they want. The question is whether you're brave enough to be honest back. He left before I could form a response, leaving me alone with my phone and my racing thoughts and the uncomfortable realization that maybe he was right. Maybe I had been in love with them for longer than I wanted to admit. Maybe that's why the thought of saying yes felt less like a sacrifice and more like coming home. My precognition sparked one more time before I could overthink it further. This vision was clearer than the others, sharp-edged and immediate. Tomorrow. Siwoo's penthouse. Me walking through that door with my list of conditions clutched in shaking hands. And their faces when I got to the last condition. The one I hadn't written down yet because putting it into words felt like standing naked in front of them. Condition 4. You have to love me, not just want me, not just need me for the baby. You have to love me the way I've been trying not to love you for 6 years. The vision showed me Minho's breath catching, Jaewon's eyes going bright with tears, Siwoo crossing the room in 3 strides to cup my face in his hands and whisper, "We already do." We've loved you since you walked into our lives and refused to be impressed by anything except our book collection. Then the vision shattered, leaving me gasping in my dark room with tears streaming down my face and the absolute certainty that tomorrow I was going to burn down every carefully constructed wall I'd ever built and hope they'd catch me when I fell. I added the fourth condition to my list with trembling fingers. Then I set my phone aside, pulled my blankets up to my chin, and tried to sleep despite knowing that in less than 12 hours, I was going to walk back into that penthouse and change all of our lives forever. My last thought before sleep claimed me was simple and terrifying, and absolutely true. I loved them, all three of them, and tomorrow I'd finally be brave enough to say it out loud. Except sleep didn't claim me. Not really. Instead, my precognition dragged me into a vision so vivid it felt like living someone else's life. I was standing in Siwoo's penthouse, afternoon light pouring through those massive windows, and I could smell all three of them. Sandalwood and leather, clean linen and bergamot, dark coffee and rain-soaked earth. But this time, their scents were different, warmer, layered with something that made my chest ache. Want, hope, love. Hayun, Dream Minho stepped toward me, and I could see the careful control in his movements, like he was afraid I'd bolt if he moved too fast. You wrote 4 conditions. I did. My voice in the vision sounded steadier than I felt. The fourth one, Dream Jaewon's voice cracked slightly. You want us to love you. Not want, not need. Dream Siwoo moved closer, and I could see the shimmer of tears in his eyes. Love, the way you've been trying not to love us. And then Dream said the words I'd been too terrified to even think while awake. I'm tired of trying not to. I'm tired of pretending friendship is enough when I've been in love with all three of you since I was 20 years old and too stupid to realize it. The vision shattered like glass. I jolted awake, heart hammering, sheets tangled around my legs. My phone read 3:47 a.m. Too early to be awake, too late to pretend I'd get any more sleep. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and pulled up the group chat we'd had since university, the one we used for everything from coordinating dinner plans to sending terrible memes at inappropriate hours. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Me. I can't sleep. 3 responses came almost instantly, like they'd been awake too, waiting. Siwoo. Neither can we. Minho. It's almost 4 a.m. Hayun. Jaewon. Are you okay? I stared at their messages, at the concern bleeding through even in text form, and felt something crack open in my chest. Me. I had a vision. About tomorrow. The typing indicators appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Minho. And me. And I think I've been lying to all of us for a really long time. My phone rang before I could second-guess sending that message. Video call. All 3 of them. I answered before my courage could fail me. They were together, crowded onto what looked like Siwoo's couch, and they all looked exactly how I felt. Exhausted, anxious, hopeful in a way that hurt to witness. Hi, I said stupidly. Hi yourself. Siwoo's voice was soft. You look terrible. Wow, thanks. That's exactly what every Omega wants to hear at 4 in the morning. You know what I mean? He shifted and I caught a glimpse of the Seoul skyline behind them, dark except for scattered lights. What did you see? In your vision? I could have lied, could have deflected with humor the way I always did when things got too real. But I was so tired of lying, even to myself. I saw me telling you the truth, I said quietly, about how I feel, about what I really want, which is. Minho leaned forward, his expression intense in that way that usually made shareholders nervous. On me, it just made my pulse spike. You, all of you, not because of the law or the baby or because you asked. I took a breath that felt like jumping off a cliff. Because I've been in love with you for years, and I was too scared to admit it. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Jaewon laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. You're killing me, sweetheart. You know that? I'm being honest. I know. That's what's killing me. He scrubbed a hand over his face. Do you have any idea how long we've been waiting to hear you say that? Since when? Since you walked into our apartment at 17, wearing that ridiculous oversized hoodie and told Minho his book collection was pretentious. Siwoo smiled, but his eyes were bright with unshed tears. You've owned us since that moment. We just didn't know if you'd ever want to be owned back. My precognition flickered, gentler this time. A soft vision of hands intertwined, scents blending into something new and perfect, three voices murmuring promises against my skin. I have conditions, I said, because apparently even confessing my feelings couldn't stop me from being practical. Four of them. If we're doing this, if I'm saying yes, then we're doing it right. Tell us. Minho's voice held an edge of command that probably worked on his board of directors. On me, it just made me want to push back. No. His eyebrows rose. No. I'm not negotiating the terms of our entire future over a video call at 4 in the morning. You asked me to meet you today, so I'll meet you, and I'll tell you my conditions in person, and then you can decide if you can live with them. Hayun. Siwoo's voice was almost pleading. You can't drop a confession like that and then make us wait. Watch me. I smiled despite the tears threatening to spill over. Besides, anticipation builds character. You're evil, Jaewon muttered. But he was smiling too. You love me anyway. We do. Minho said it simply, like it was the easiest truth he'd ever spoken. God help us, we absolutely do. The confession hung between us, weightless and monumental all at once. 10 a.m., I said softly. Siwoo's place. Don't be late. We won't. I ended the call before any of us could say anything else, before I could see the hope blooming on their faces and lose my nerve entirely. Then I pulled up my list of conditions one more time and read through each one, committing them to memory. By the time the sun started painting Seoul in shades of gold and pink, I knew exactly what I was going to say. I knew exactly what I was going to ask for, and for the first time in my life, I believed I might actually deserve to get it. If you're losing your mind over what happens next, smash that subscribe button, because trust me, you need to see how this conversation goes down. Things are about to get real in the best possible way. The belief lasted exactly 4 hours and 32 minutes. Long enough to shower, get dressed in clothes that made me look more confident than I felt, and stand outside Siwoo's building with my heart trying to escape through my rib cage. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of coffee from a nearby cafe and the exhaust from Seoul's relentless traffic. Normal things. Normal morning, except nothing about this was normal. My phone buzzed. Siwoo. We're waiting. Take your time. I looked up at the building, all glass and steel reaching toward a sky that was too blue for how terrified I felt. 42 floors. I'd made this trip hundreds of times. Never once had it felt like walking toward the edge of my entire future. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual, my reflection in the polished doors showing someone who looked calm, composed, like he hadn't spent the entire morning alternating between excited butterflies and nausea. My precognition was suspiciously quiet. No visions, no flashes of possible futures. Just silence. That should have been my first warning. The elevator chimed. Doors opened, and I stepped out into the hallway that smelled like expensive candles and new beginnings, my list of conditions folded in my jacket pocket like a talisman. I knocked. The door opened so fast they must have been standing right there. Minho looked like he hadn't slept. Jaewon looked like he'd tried and failed. Siwoo looked like he'd given up entirely and just accepted caffeine as his new best friend. Hi, I said, for the second time in 6 hours. Come in. Minho stepped back, and I caught the tremor in his hand before he shoved it in his pocket. Please. The penthouse looked the same as always. Floor-to-ceiling windows showing Seoul spread out like a promise. Furniture that cost more than my yearly rent. Art on the walls that I'd helped Siwoo pick out 3 years ago when he'd complained that his decorator had no soul, but the energy was different, charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. They didn't sit. Neither did I. We all just stood there in the living room, and I could smell the anxiety rolling off them in waves, sharp and bitter beneath their usual scents. I have my answer, I said, because waiting would only make this harder. And my conditions. We'll agree to anything. Jaewon's voice was rough. Whatever you need. You haven't heard them yet. Doesn't matter. Siwoo moved closer, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat of him. We meant what we said last night. We love you. That's not conditional. I pulled out my folded paper with shaking hands. 4 conditions. 4 ways to ask for everything while pretending I wasn't terrified of wanting it. Condition 1, I started and my voice only wobbled a little. This stops being about the law and starts being about us. If I'm doing this, it's not to save you from government regulations. It's because we're choosing each other. Yes, Minho didn't hesitate. Agreed. Condition 2, no more pretending you're asking me as friends. If I'm giving you everything, you don't get to hide behind platonic excuses anymore. We stopped pretending the moment we asked you. Jaewon stepped closer. Maybe before that. My hands were shaking harder now. Condition 3, I'm not an incubator. I'm not a solution to your legal problems. If you want me, you want all of me. Broken parts, precognitive visions, panic attacks in grocery stores, all of it. Hayun, Siwoo's voice cracked. We've wanted all of you since before we knew what wanting meant. The broken parts are just more of you to love. I looked down at the paper, at the 4th condition, written in handwriting, that got messier the more emotional I'd been while writing it. Condition 4, I whispered. You have to love me, not just want me, not just need me for the baby. You have to love me the way I've been trying not to love you for 6 years. The silence was deafening. Then my precognition slammed into me like a freight train. Not a gentle vision this time, but a full-body assault of images and sensations and futures splintering in 1,000 different directions. I saw Minho's hand on my face, tender and possessive. Saw Jaewon crying as he held our child for the first time. Saw Siwoo's scent wrapped around me like a blanket, safe and warm and home. But beneath it all, I saw something else. Something darker. A hospital room. Beeping machines. My body too still on white sheets. Their faces devastated as a doctor explained complications. Risks. Percentages that meant nothing when translated into the possibility of losing me. And underneath that, their guilt. The knowledge that they'd asked me to do this, to risk everything, because they'd been too selfish to let me go. The vision released me so suddenly I stumbled. Siwoo caught me, his hands steadying on my shoulders. Hayun, what did you see? I stared at them, at 3 men who loved me enough to ask for everything, who I loved enough to want to give it. And I realized with horrible, crystalline clarity that my precognition was showing me the cost. Not just of saying yes, but of what saying yes might mean. I can't do this, I heard myself say, and watched their faces crumble. Not because I don't love you, but because I saw what could happen, what pregnancy could cost. And I can't ask you to live with that guilt if something goes wrong. Hayun, no. Jaewon reached for me, but I stepped back. You don't understand. In the vision, I die. Maybe not definitely, but the possibility is there. And you 3 are left with a child and the knowledge that you asked me to risk everything for a law that shouldn't exist in the first place. So we fight the law. Minho's voice was sharp with desperation. We find another way. We don't let you go because of something that might not even happen. You can't fight precognition with hope, I whispered. I've tried. I turned toward the door, my list of conditions crumpling in my fist, and took 1 step before Siwoo's voice stopped me cold. I had a vasectomy. I froze. What? 3 years ago, after my doctor told me I might have the same heart condition that killed my father. His voice was steady despite the tears on his face. I never told you because it didn't matter. We were just friends. But Hayun, if pregnancy is what scares you, then we find another way. Adoption, surrogacy, I don't care. I just need you to stay. I turned back slowly and saw the truth written across all 3 of their faces. They'd already known about the risks, about the possibilities, and they were choosing me anyway. You idiots, I breathed. Probably, Minho agreed, and his careful composure was cracking at the edges. But we're your idiots. I looked at Siwoo, really looked at him, and saw the truth etched in every line of his face. You had surgery. You risked your entire future because you were scared of dying like your father, and you never told us. I told them. He gestured at Minho and Jaewon. 6 months after. But I couldn't tell you because you would have looked at me exactly the way you're looking at me now, like I'm breakable, and I needed you to keep seeing me as whole. You are whole, you absolute disaster of a human. I crossed the space between us without thinking, my hands finding his face. Whole and frustrating, and apparently incapable of asking for help when you need it. Sounds familiar, Jaewon muttered. Almost like someone else I know who keeps devastating visions to himself because he doesn't want us to worry. I shot him a look. That's, completely different. Is it? Minho moved closer, and suddenly I was surrounded by all three of them, their scents wrapping around me like a living thing. You saw a future where pregnancy might hurt you, and your first instinct was to protect us from the guilt. That's the same self-sacrificing nonsense Siwoo pulled. I'm not self-sacrificing, I'm practical. You're terrified, Siwoo corrected gently, of wanting this, of letting yourself have it, of believing that we mean it when we say we love you more than any law, any child, any future that doesn't have you in it. My precognition sparked, but softer this time. Not a vision of death or loss, but something quieter. The four of us tangled together on this very couch, laughing about something stupid. Domestic. Real. The vision I saw, I started, then stopped, trying to find words for something that felt too big for language. It wasn't just about dying. It was about you three having to live with asking me to risk everything, about the guilt destroying what we could have had. So we don't ask. Jaewon's hand found mine, warm and steady. We're asking you to be ours, Hayun. Not to carry a child you're terrified of carrying. Not to solve our legal problems, just to stay. But the law, screw the law. Minho's voice held an edge I rarely heard, the kind that meant he was about to do something either brilliant or catastrophic. I've been making calls since last night. There are loopholes, international precedents, ways to fight this that don't involve risking you. You've been researching legal loopholes instead of sleeping. Obviously. Did you think I was going to let some bureaucratic nonsense take you away from us? He stepped closer, and I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the determination burning underneath. I didn't build an empire by accepting things I couldn't change. I built it by changing the things that needed changing. That's either really romantic or really arrogant. Can it be both? His lips quirked into something that almost resembled a smile. You fell in love with us. Clearly you have a type. I laughed despite myself, despite the tears threatening to spill over, despite everything. You're all impossible. And you're stalling. Siwoo's thumb traced along my jaw, achingly gentle. You wrote 4 conditions. We've agreed to all of them. The question is whether you're brave enough to say yes when it's not about saving us, but about choosing us. My hands were still shaking, but I unfolded the crumpled paper anyway, smoothing it against my chest. 4 conditions. 4 ways of asking for everything while pretending I wasn't dying to give it. I don't know how to do this, I admitted quietly. I've spent 6 years convincing myself that loving you was dangerous, that wanting more than friendship would ruin everything. I don't know how to just stop being afraid. You don't have to stop being afraid. Jaewon pressed his forehead against my temple, his breath warm against my skin. You just have to be afraid with us instead of alone. My precognition flickered one more time, and this vision was so clear it stole my breath. All 4 of us, years from now, older and scarred by life, but still tangled together. Still choosing each other, still whole. My answer is yes, I whispered, and felt them go still around me. Not because of the law or the baby or anything, except the fact that I love you, all of you, and I'm tired of pretending I don't. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Then Siwoo kissed me. It wasn't careful or tentative or any of the things a first kiss probably should have been. It was desperate and claiming and tasted like 6 years of wanting finally given permission to exist. When he pulled back, Minho was right there, his hand sliding into my hair as he kissed me with a precision that made my knees weak. Controlled and devastating all at once. Jaewon was gentler, his lips soft against mine, his hands cradling my face like I was something precious he'd been terrified of breaking. Hours, Minho murmured against my throat, and I could feel his heartbeat racing against my chest. Your hours. Took you long enough to claim me. I was breathless and shaking and happier than I'd ever been. I've been waiting since I was 20. We've been terrified since you were 17, Siwoo admitted. Terrified of scaring you away, of asking for more than you wanted to give. Idiots, I said again, but it sounded like affection, like love, like coming home. You're idiots, Jaewon corrected and pulled me closer. My precognition showed me flashes of our future, soft and bright and utterly mundane. Grocery shopping arguments, late-night conversations, hands intertwined. Across restaurant tables. A life built not on grand gestures, but on choosing each other every single day. I have one more condition, I said against Siwoo's shoulder. Anything. Stop looking at me like I'm going to disappear. I pulled back enough to meet all three of their gazes. I said yes, I'm staying. You're stuck with me now. Promise? Minho's voice was uncharacteristically vulnerable. I promise. I kissed him again, then Jaewon, then Siwoo. Now someone please tell me you have a plan for the government situation that doesn't involve me risking my life, because I'd really like to enjoy being claimed without existential dread. Minho's smile was sharp enough to cut. Sweetheart, I've had a plan since before we asked. Did you really think I'd put you in danger? You just asked me to have your baby. I asked if you'd consider it. I never said it was the only option. He pulled out his phone, showing me documents I didn't understand. Legal precedent, international surrogacy laws, adoption fast tracks. We have options. I stared at the screen, then at him. You manipulative genius. You love me anyway. Unfortunately, but I was smiling. We all were. And somewhere in the space between terror and hope, I realized this was it. This was the future my precognition had been trying to show me all along. Not perfect, not safe, but ours. So let me get this straight. I pulled back just enough to look at all three of them, my brain finally catching up to what Minho had just revealed. You had backup plans this entire time. Plural, plans that didn't involve me risking my life. 7 backup plans, actually, Minho admitted without a hint of shame. I've been working on them since the law was announced. The pregnancy request was option 8. Option 8, I stared at him. You had 7 other solutions, and you still asked me to have your baby, because none of the other options gave us what we actually wanted. Siwoo's arms tightened around my waist. A legal loophole doesn't give us you. A court battle doesn't give us mornings waking up next to you. Fighting the government doesn't give us a life where you're ours and we're yours. The baby was never really about the baby, Jaewon said softly. It was about having a reason to ask for what we've wanted, since you walked into our lives and called Minho's book collection pretentious. It is pretentious. Half of those books are in languages he doesn't even speak. I speak 6 languages, Minho protested. You own books in 9. I couldn't stop smiling. And you're all telling me that this entire emotional crisis was because you were too scared to just ask me out like normal people? Normal people don't fall in love with their best friend and then watch him date other people for 6 years while pretending to be happy about it, Jaewon muttered. I blinked. I never dated anyone seriously. Exactly. Siwoo pressed his lips to my temple. You kept everyone at arm's length, and we convinced ourselves it was because you didn't want to mate. Took us way too long to realize you were waiting for us to figure our shit out. My precognition had gone quiet, settled into a warm hum of contentment instead of its usual chaos of possible futures. Like even my gift knew this was right. I can't believe you manipulated me into confessing my feelings, I said, but there was no heat in it. We didn't manipulate you. Minho's hand found my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone. We asked you an impossible question, and you gave us an even more impossible answer. You demanded we be honest about what we wanted. That's not manipulation. That's you being brave enough to call us on our bullshit. Language, I said automatically, then immediately felt ridiculous. We're about to bond, and I'm worried about cursing. I've lost my mind. You're about to bond, Jaewon repeated, voice wondering. With us, all 3 of us. Are you sure, Hayun? Because once we do this, once we claim you properly, there's no taking it back. I looked at each of them in turn. Minho, brilliant and controlled and absolutely terrified of losing me. Jaewon, soft-hearted and anxious beneath his alpha exterior. Siwoo, who'd had surgery in secret because he was scared of being seen as weak. My three idiots. My home. I've never been more sure of anything, I said. Claim me, make me yours, and stop looking like you think I'm going to change my mind. Siwoo moved first, pulling me against him as his teeth found the scent gland on my neck. The bite was sharp and claiming and sent electricity racing down my spine. My omega instincts, dormant for 23 years, surged to life with a force that made my knees buckle. Minho caught me, turning my face to his, as Siwoo's mark settled into my skin, permanent and perfect. His bite was more controlled but no less devastating, placed on the other side of my neck with a precision that made me gasp. Jaewon was gentler, his lips trailing along my jaw before his teeth sank into the junction of my shoulder and neck. The third mark completed something fundamental inside me, like a puzzle piece I hadn't known was missing, finally clicking into place. Ours, Minho murmured, and I could feel the bond settling between all four of us, golden and unbreakable. Finally ours. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. The sensation of being claimed by three alphas simultaneously was overwhelming in the best possible way, my body singing with the rightness of it. How do you feel? Siwoo asked, his hand splayed across my stomach, protective and possessive. Like I've been waiting my whole life for this and didn't even know it. I turned in his arms, looking at all three of them, at the marks I could see on their necks too, mirror images of what they'd given me. And like I need to sit down before I pass out, they laughed, the sound warm and relieved, and guided me to the couch. Siwoo pulled me into his lap while Minho and Jaewon settled on either side. And suddenly I was surrounded by the scent of my mates, rich and perfect and home. So, I said after my breathing had returned to something resembling normal, what happens now? Now we fight the government properly, Minho said, already pulling out his phone, with lawyers and international pressure and every dirty trick I've learned building my company. And when we win, because we will win, we figure out the rest together. Children through surrogacy if we want them, Jaewon added, or adoption, or none at all if that's what you choose. The point is, it's our choice, not the government's. And in the meantime, Siwoo pressed a kiss to my mark, making me shiver. We get to just be us, together, finally. My precognition sparked one last time, showing me a future that was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. Arguments over whose turn it was to do dishes, lazy Sunday mornings tangled together, a child's laughter echoing through rooms that smelled like all four of us. A life built on love and choice, and the courage to ask for what we wanted. I love you, I said, to all of them and each of them. Even though you're manipulative and dramatic and apparently incapable of just using your words like normal people. We love you too, they said in perfect unison, and it sounded like a promise, like forever, like home. 6 months later, the law was overturned. Minho's legal team, combined with international pressure and some truly spectacular bribes to the right politicians, had dismantled the forced breeding protocol piece by piece. We celebrated with champagne and takeout curled together in the penthouse that had become our shared space, and I couldn't stop smiling. What are you thinking about? Jaewon asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my arm. That I almost said no, I admitted. I almost walked away because I was too scared to believe this could be real. But you didn't. Minho kissed my temple. You were brave enough to say yes. We all were, Siwoo added. Brave enough to ask for what we wanted. Brave enough to choose each other. I looked at my three mates, at the life we'd built together in half a year, and felt my precognition hum with contentment. No visions of the future this time. No warnings or possibilities. Just the certainty that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Hey, I said softly. Thank you for asking me an impossible question. Thank you for giving us an impossible answer, Minho replied. And surrounded by the people I loved, I finally understood what my precognition had been trying to tell me all along. Sometimes the scariest future is also the most beautiful one. You just have to be brave enough to choose it. If this story grabbed you by the heart and didn't let go, hit that subscribe button right now. We've got more emotionally devastating, beautifully crafted stories coming your way, and you definitely don't want to miss them. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.